All right, man, peace. So they had a good little segment here on ESPN regarding who they deemed to be the top 50 greatest black athletes of all time. This list was compiled for a publication that ESPN sponsors called The Undefeated. Let's see what they have to say. Of course, I'm going to chime in.
Oh, this next topic should spark some serious debate. The Undefeated ranked the 50 greatest black athletes of all time. So they polled over 10,000 adults who were asked to rank 200 athletes on 20 different surveys. Each athlete was ranked on 4 factors. Ranking dominance, inspiration, and impact on society.
That's 3, isn't it? Like dominance.
Yeah, that's why I kind of stumbled over it.
That's right, 3, yeah.
Overall ranking, dominance, inspiration, impact on society. Okay, so here they are. Number 10, Jerry Rice, followed by Gabby Douglas, Simone Biles, Hank Aaron, Serena Williams, Jesse Owens comes in at number 5, Willie Mays is 4, Muhammad Ali 3, Jackie Robinson 2, Michael Jordan is number 1.
Well, first off, right off the bat, you can see a lot of the political correctness because Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas, they have no business being in the top 10. Not for any metric. I'm sorry, but no. And I understand that both of those sisters were very, very successful in the Olympics. I know that they both dominated, particularly Simone Biles. They both achieved a lot of gold medals. All that's well and good. But if you're talking about the top 50 greatest black athletes and you're talking about impact and things of that nature, even if you want to make sure that you have more than one so-called black female in the top 10, they really should have had people like Althea Gibson and Wilma Rudolph in the top 10 rather than these two. I'm sorry. And, Arthur Ashe, I think, should have been in the top 10 also. Just looking at this list, Arthur Ashe. And, well, let's see what they have to say.
Number 1, Coach is here to join in on the fun. So good to have you with us. Who wants to start on this?
I would actually, the white guy would like to start.
Okay.
No shit. The so-called white liberal, he always bogarts anything in regards to so-called black people. As I've stated ad infinitum, the so-called black liberal, they follow the so-called white liberal. The so-called black woke Negro, they follow the so-called white woke person or entity or whatever you want to call them. That's why you'll notice a lot of these people who follow a lot of these alternative theories, a lot of them, they get it from the Caucasian, normally a weed head Caucasian. All right, guaranteed, never fails.
Right here.
The white guy will start.
Now let the white guy on this show tell the public right now, this is a terrible list.
All right, go on with
This is
your bad
insane.
self,
Based
Max.
on the criteria, number 1, and it's Muhammad Ali. By so much, it's ridiculous.
Well, I would say that Ali probably should be number 1, but I wouldn't say that it's by so much. I think that it's by the dictates of the American liberal media that has deified Muhammad Ali. He was a very brave man. He was a phenomenal athlete. But to say he's number 1 by that much of a long shot, no. That's really an attempt to carry on the narrative of the liberal media that he was a force for globalization, and he was not. That's the image that they've created for him in the last 30 plus years since they've owned the rights to his name. But there are a lot of so-called black athletes that have, that have moved society in various ways, whether you want to say quote unquote forward or quote unquote upward. I mean, all that is based on your perspective and on what your ideological beliefs are. But Jack Johnson was just as impactful to me in the sporting world as a so-called black male athlete as Ali was.
Number 2 is a guy who didn't make the top 10. Joe Louis was heavyweight champion of the world, of the whole wide world, 9 years before Jackie Robinson broke the color line in Major League Baseball, which was significant mostly in this country.
Right, and Jack Johnson was the heavyweight champion of the world, and he was a so-called black man, and he was heavyweight champion about 30 years before Jackie Robinson allegedly broke the color line. So what are you really saying?
Not only was Joe Louis heavyweight champion of the world, he made the most title defenses in boxing history, any weight class, doesn't matter. The 25 title defense. He had a 12-year title run.
Phenomenal boxer, phenomenal athlete, Joe Louis. The first fighter that you really see on screen who threw punches and didn't look like a chick throwing punches. When you watch a lot of those old time fighters, from the 1910s and 1920s. They're throwing punches and the wrong foot is coming off the ground. They're throwing wide looping shots. Their chin is in the air. Joe Louis is one of the first, if not the first fighter that you see on those old film reels who has perfect technique. Right? Jack Johnson was another one who had great overall technique, but he also, did a lot of wild things. But Joe Louis was the first fighter that you saw that was textbook. He fought a lot like Mikey Garcia does, right? Chin down, hands up, lead shoulder, covering the chin, moving forward, shuffling his feet, right? Now, Mikey Garcia is a little bit more mobile, but their style is very, very, very similar. But Joe Louis was a phenomenal fighter. Problem with Joe Louis was that his competition can be questioned. I mean, for goodness sakes, the man's list of opponents were known as the Bum of the Month Club. I mean, let's be for real. And they would not allow him to fight any other great black fighters until the end of his career. And when he got in the ring with a lot of those black fighters, a lot of them would beat him. Let's be for real. Now that's a mixture of those other black fighters being extremely skilled, and also Joe being old, because Joe was a phenomenal fighter no matter who he fought. But, those are just the facts of the matter.
He served in the armed forces during the Second World War and that it still made 25 title defenses altogether. And more importantly, he had lost one fight on his way to the title against Max Schmeling, who was a German contender. And then Joe Louis won the title against someone else, Jimmy Braddock, the Cinderella Man, and defended his title against the one man to beat him, Max Schmeling, who by this time was being used by Hitler as an example of Aryan supremacy. He was drafted into the German army, and Schmeling himself was a good guy, but he was used.
No, he was no good guy. All that is bullshit. That's a narrative that the media has created. Schmeling was a Nazi just like all the rest of them. But he put on a good act after the fact. But it is what it is, allegedly.
Was used as a symbol of Aryan supremacy during the Second World War, where the fate of planet Earth hung in the balance.
The fate of planet Earth did not hang in the balance for the Second World War. What the Second World War was about was making sure that they could consolidate all of the countries of the world, particularly the European countries, into forming what was known as the UN and NATO down the line. They tried it after World War I with the League of Nations. It failed because America was still very reticent about globalization. But after World War II, they bought in because they had enough members amongst the elite politicians who had been indoctrinated into the banking philosophies and ideologies. All right? But that's neither here nor there.
And they had a rematch at Madison Square Garden, and a lot of Hitler's high command was there in the front row to watch it. And in front of the whole wide world, Joe Louis destroyed this man in one round.
Yeah, he sure did. He beat the living shit out that man. I mean, he broke his ribs. I believe he broke his cheekbone. Like, he had that man grabbing the rope, yelling and screaming.
And became a symbol of American pride.
No, he became a pawn, right? That's what he was. When you say he became a symbol of American pride, he became a mascot. They used him up, used him dry like a good hoe. That's what they did to Joe Louis. And then had the nerve to talk about how much he owed in taxes. Okay? So that's how they treated Joe Louis. They dogged him out and he was used. But he was a hero, a major hero to the so-called black community in his day. There was a very, very famous story about a black man who was on death row. And when he went into the gas chamber for them to kill him, they overheard through the microphone that they had in the gas chamber, the black man was praying and he was saying, "Save me, Joe Louis," because they looked at Joe Louis like a Superman.
Globally, and a symbol of oppressed people all over the world, globally, in a way that few athletes have ever been. In fact, that fight was actually bigger in most ways than even Ali Frazier. That may have been the biggest sporting event or the most significant of the 20th century. Joe Louis is considered the greatest heavyweight champion for most of the 20th century and is clear number 2 choice on this list based.
You know what's funny? Because he's right, Joe Louis was considered the greatest, certainly the greatest heavyweight until Ali. But you know what's funny? They never, or people don't look back and really analyze and scrutinize how much Muhammad Ali used to belittle Joe Louis during his time, especially when he first came into prominence in the 1960s, he would customarily belittle Joe Louis. He would belittle Joe Louis as a fighter. He would belittle Joe Louis for Joe Louis's ideological beliefs. And, people swept that under the rug. But when Mayweather came out and said that he believed that he was better than Ali, everybody castigated him for it. It's just funny how, people conveniently forget certain things.
Based on their criteria, and it is an outrage that he's not in the top 10. Shame on you, public.
I agree with him. He should be in the top 10. So should Arthur Ashe and Bill Russell. Sorry, but those two little gymnasts, they should not be in the top 10. Absolutely not. They should be like in the top 30.
Go ahead.
I mean, if Carl Lewis is not in the top 10, why should they be?
Go ahead, Coach.
Okay, I'm going to go with the guy that ended up beating him, Muhammad Ali. And Muhammad Ali influenced my life more than people can imagine. Growing up with a dad that was a master sergeant in the Army for 27 years, I can remember the fight like it was yesterday when he was going to fight Joe Louis. And we were sitting in the house and we were listening on the radio.
What the hell is up with Herm? Talking about when he was going to fight Joe Louis. Somebody need to make sure that Herm took his pills.
Muhammad Ali.
Sonny Liston, you mean?
Yeah, I mean,
Sonny Liston. Sonny Liston, yeah.
He's going to fight Sonny Liston.
Ali and Lewis never fought. They were compared to each other.
Excuse me, Sonny Liston.
Greatest heavyweight fight of all time. Thriller in Manila.
Sonny Liston. Muhammad Ali was going to fight Sonny Liston. And my dad was mad. He said, there's no way that loudmouth guy's going to beat Sonny Liston, right? And I said, Dad, he's going to beat him. I was a young guy, right? He ended up beating. My father wouldn't talk to me for a week. And as you wind the story up forward, what happened for me in my life, I watched Muhammad Ali win a gold medal, basically come back and say, you know what? I'm not going to join the Army. I'm not going. He gave up his ability to fight. That shocked me.
And notice, yes, Ali gave up on his career, right? He didn't get down on one knee and beg the American people to accept him, beg the so-called white man and white woman to accept him. He didn't get down on one knee and, in front of the American flag and say, please love me, please treat me fair. He said, you know what? You don't like me. I don't like you. I'm going to be a part of my own. I'm going to be a part of my own community. Once again, I don't agree with the ideologies of the so-called Nation of Islam in regards to their religious beliefs, but I do agree with a lot of their stances in regards to a creation of a culture and what they attempted to do, even though it was erroneous, right? And a lot of their conduct towards their congregation, towards their adherents, was a little off and very off-putting. But the overall concept was, it showed a ruling class mentality and so did Muhammad Ali. He showed a ruling class mentality. Okay? He didn't say, oh, well, I'm just going to protest. He didn't protest at all. He said, this is what I believe in. This is what I adhere to. This is what I'm about. And if you're going to try to threaten me by taking away my career, do what you got to do. Right? He didn't sit outside and have people, have a bunch of people saying, well, I don't know why the white man won't treat us right because, all he's doing is protesting so the cops treat us right. Right. Ali was the first one saying, you know what? Don't worry about them. We should have our own. That's what's called having a ruling class mentality.
I said, well, he's not going to do that, is he? He did it. In 1978, we were playing the New Orleans Saints. That Friday night, Muhammad Ali beat Leon Spinks, in the Superdome. We were going to play the Saints on that Sunday. Okay, I'm a professional football player now. It's 1978. Saturday night, Muhammad Ali walks into the hotel after the night before, after the fight that Saturday. He was still in New Orleans, and I had.
Yeah, probably popping mad broads knowing him.
I had enough nerves to go up and introduce myself to him. And I shook his hand, I told him who I was. And he took me over on the side, and we had about a 5-minute conversation. And I left with this. He said, son, never be afraid to bet on you.
That's right. That's how a man thinks. Always bet on yourself. That's why I say, man, everything is about self-validation and just understanding who you are and not seeking any type of validation or approval from other people. You cannot live like that. That shows a total lack of belief in yourself. And you see that consistently with every great man, every man who achieved anything. It starts within yourself and belief in yourself. And that's why I always tell brothers that, man. You can't be running around worried about who doesn't like you. And that's what all this civil rights and a lot of this stuff involving Kaepernick and these modern day internet revolutionaries and all this woke shit is really about. It's really about a reflection of their low self-esteem and the fact that they need the so-called white man and white woman to help them believe in themselves. And it's pathetic.
Because you was good enough. You told me that in 1978 after listening to him beat.
I like that. I'm going to rewind it.
And he took me over on the side, and we had about a 5-minute conversation, and I left with this. He said, son, never be afraid to bet on you, because you was good enough. He told me that in 1978 after.
That's right. You was good enough. You're not supposed to be validated or defined by anybody else other than who you are. That's it. So all that fake shit that a lot of these niggas are doing on the internet, talking all this shit about, Colin Kaepernick and Cap is fighting for the people. He's not fighting for a motherfucking thing. That dude is control. He's a pawn. After listening to him beat Sonny Liston on the radio, I got to meet Muhammad Ali. That changed my life right there. That guy changed my life. And then saw him again back in Arizona when he would give, he had obviously, the Lou Gehrig disease. He had this Parkinson's. Yeah, Parkinson's disease, and he had this big event every year raising money. And so, well, the corporations that owned him had the big event. They trotted him out as a mascot, all right, because they owned his name and, they basically owned his likeness. So they owned him. And that's part of the tragic aspect of Ali that many people don't know about, that he sold the rights to his name in the late 70s after Elijah Muhammad passed. Ali, I think, as a defense mechanism, as a survival mechanism, and maybe because it was kind of always in his spirit, because he was a very gregarious person. He was a people person. So I think that he took Elijah Muhammad's death as an avenue to go become more mainstream. And they took advantage of him for that. But it is what it is.
And saw him again, and he remembered who I was. He knew I was the head coach of the Jets. That guy changed my life. This guy, Muhammad Ali. For me, he's number one.
And in a roundabout way, he changed my life as well, and I'll tell you that story in a minute. Muhammad Ali is definitely one on my list. Max, I totally get where you're coming from. I can appreciate you being the boxing historian that you are, the excellent boxing historian that you are. I'll give you credit for that. Joe Louis definitely warrants consideration. But I'll give you not just my one, but my top 5. I'm gonna give you Muhammad Ali. Okay, I'm gonna give you a guy like Jesse Owens. I'm gonna give you Serena Williams, who's in my top 5 with the adversity that she has had to endure, and of course Jackie Robinson for me is at number 2.
Well, I think I will put Serena Williams in my list of top 10 black men to participate in sports in the 20th century, 21st century, definitely.
Obviously, Michael Jordan's the greatest that I've ever seen, but at the same time, from a social activist standpoint, obviously he pales in comparison to those individuals mentioned. He does a lot behind the scenes, but from a public persona, that's not necessarily the case. That wasn't his thing.
Yeah, because, part of being an activist is that you have to act. That's what this is about. It's just about talking shit in front of a microphone. Michael Jordan was a businessman. Businessmen do what they need to do behind the scenes. And also he understood that most so-called black people in America, they really don't want any solutions. They just want to bitch and complain. All right. So I've always said that Jordan did the right thing. All right. And a lot of people don't like that because so-called blacks, they like to count other people's pockets. They like to count other people's money. They believe that they're justified in doing that. It's part of the victimization mentality that so many so-called blacks embrace. Oh, well, what has Michael Jordan done for the black community? I guarantee you, even from a proportionate scale, Michael Jordan has done more for the so-called black community than 99.999% of so-called black people. Okay? If Michael Jordan is worth $500 million, and by all accounts he's worth $1.5 billion, But say he's worth 500 million and he gave 1% of that, right? Which is what? 1% of 500 million is what, 5 million? How many people out there have $500 and gave $5 to charity? Right. Most of you people, if you have $500 in your pocket, you're thinking about going shopping with it. All right. So before you worry about counting the next man's money, worry about what you're doing with your money. All right. Like that dude JFK said, ask not what your country can do for you. Ask what you can do for your country. Stop worrying about what every other person is doing with their money and how they're donating. All right. That's the coward's way out. That's the victim's way out. I'm tired of hearing niggas always counting the next man's money.
And when you think about this, anytime, understand this, and I just said this a little while ago on SportsCenter, anytime you have a list and the word black is associated with it, as in the black athlete, please understand that it's not enough about your excellence as an athlete. It's the adverse circumstances which you had to overcome in order to be as great as you are, to have to endure that, to not have the freedom to just play the game and perform at an elite level, but to have every adverse circumstance imaginable thrusted into your presence and having to overcome that. It resonates with me when it comes to Muhammad Ali.
Yeah, well, you know what? Also, what comes along with being a great black athlete is having a lot of things put before you on a silver platter. All right. Yes, a lot of so-called black athletes come from adverse conditions and bad backgrounds. But a lot of them, when they're 13 and 14, a lot of them are getting a lot of perks. A lot of things served to them on a silver platter. All right. These are just facts. They're getting recruited to major institutions and universities around the country. A lot of them have women throwing themselves at them from the time they're 15, 16 years old. So it all depends on your perspective. Now, is there a certain thing called the quote unquote black experience that people go through here in America? Sure. It's part of being in captivity. But let's not act like everybody is, living 7 to a 1 bedroom, because that's not the case.
Who sat up there and obviously he was, you're talking about he refused to enter the draft that in April of 1967, 6 months before I was born. That June, he was convicted of draft evasion, sentenced to 5 years in prison, fined about $10,000, stripped of his title. Couldn't obviously fight for 3 years, knowing that he had to go through all of that. We have to pay attention to that. But we also have to pay attention to the social consciousness of this man in different ways. We know a lot about what he did during the civil rights era and beyond. We know what he did for the black community. But as a journalist, what I remember most is a story that was once told by the great Gil Noble.
The greatest thing about Ali was that he was sincere in his gregariousness. It wasn't an act. Like he truly loved his people. There's no doubt about that.
And if I got any part of it wrong, my apologies, because I'm just going on memory here. Gil Noble was an outstanding reporter in New York for many, many years, had a show like it is that aired on Sundays. And one of the things that Muhammad Ali was doing, everybody thinks about his relationship with the great Howard Cosell, a man that I idolized as a boxing commentator, as a commentator overall. But Gil Noble went to talk to Muhammad Ali along with the rest of the press corps. And from my understanding, Ali actually pulled him to the side and gave him a one-on-one interview, which was what helped elevate Gil Noble in the profession of journalism.
Yeah, a lot like how Floyd Mayweather does with you, right? And helps elevate you and diversify the amount of topics and subjects that you cover by giving you exclusives. That's why he flipped out on you when you said, "Oh, if he doesn't fight Pacquiao next, nobody should buy into his fight." That's why he flipped out. Then you're going to try to act like you didn't know why he flipped out on you. You know why.
Because Ali, and when asked about what he could do for Ali said, pass it on and make sure you do for others what I did for you. Reach back, extend yourself, give a helping hand. And those kind of things are why I never hesitate to help young African Americans in this business, because that was what happened for Gil Noble. Those were the kind of things that happened for the late, great Ed Bradley.
That's why you help young African Americans. Man, please. You probably hire about 2 or 3 black interns and you help them figure out where the coffee shop is, where they go to pick up your Frappuccino for you.
Those were the kind of things that happened for somebody as phenomenal as a Bryant Gumbel, somebody else that I idolize, and others. When you have an African American who is elite in so many ways and faces such incredible adverse circumstances, not only conquers and overcomes, but has the consciousness to reach back and to make sure that people, even outside of his chosen profession, but who happen to be black, and have the foresight to witness or to see what they can do for our community as a whole. Those are the kind of things that make you top notch. It's what made Ali great. It's what made Jackie Robinson great. It's what made Hank Aaron great. It's what even makes Serena Williams great because of what she has to deal with in the tennis world.
And how about,
what
Coach,
you
brought up a name right as we were coming into the segment. You said, where is Bill Russell?
Yeah.
And he's number 36.
No.
Bill Russell, by these criteria, dominant, social impact.
No way. And then another guy, too. And Stephen A. will remember this guy, Jim Brown.
No question.
But when we have inspiration and
Jim Brown.
impact on society,
Bill Russell.
Well, hell, we're gonna go there. Well, how about Kareem Abdul-Jabbar? How about Magic Johnson? All right. I mean, when you start making a list about greatest black athletes or so-called black athletes, of course, there's going to be contention. That's why y'all make lists so people can argue about it all damn day. But I mean, just looking at this list right here, there's no way that Simone Biles and Gabby Douglas should be in the top 10. That's number one. That right there is ridiculous. They should be out of there. No, that's without even thinking about it. Jerry Rice, I love Jerry Rice. That's my favorite football player ever. But I don't know if he should make quite the top 10. Not if you're going by all the criteria that they laid out.
Jerry Rice is 10, and Jerry Rice is a great
Muhammad
wideout.
Ali is
But how is he 10 and
Hey,
Bill
guys,
Russell's not on the
guys.
top 10?
In fairness, there's no way in hell that LeBron James deserves to be 29th on the list either.
I'll have to see the list, but that sounds about right.
Higher?
He should be much higher.
Yeah.
He should be
This is
much
true.
higher.
This is true.
Well, shit, Kareem ain't in there.
This is true.
He should be much higher.
I love this conversation, and we're going to continue it a little later in the show. There's
All right, so now they've moved ahead in regards to the discussion about the top 50 greatest athletes to the topic of Tiger Woods. Let's see what they have to say.
Early in the show, we discussed the undefeated list of the top 50 black athletes of all time, and one name that raised eyebrows after being left off the list entirely, that would be Tiger Woods. Max, I will start with you on this one.
Yeah.
Do you have an issue with Tiger not being on here?
No, not at all. It's a list of athletes.
Yeah.
Tiger's a golfer. Only by the most liberal definition of athlete can you include golfers on this list. Every time Tiger Woods got Athlete of the Year, it was an outrage. Because, like, Nate Robinson, every year of his career, was clearly a far greater athlete than Tiger Woods.
What an asinine statement.
Right? Like, any athletic NBA player is a far greater athlete than Tiger Woods. Athlete? Like, when we use the word athlete, what we're really talking about is competitors who play sports. That means that you should be able to gauge their athletic ability from the sport in which they play.
No. When you say the greatest athletes, yes, you're talking about the sports or the sports world, but you're talking about their proficiency in that sport. All right? There's many examples of great athletes in different sports who were probably not that athletic. People like Larry Bird, many other athletes. I mean, even in the football, Joe Montana was a good athlete, but is he a greater athlete than Cam Newton? No. But would he rank higher on a list of greatest quarterbacks to ever play? Yes. All right. There's a lot of skill. There's a lot of the mental aspect that goes into being a great performer. All right. This is not a decathlon. It's not just about how high you jump and how fast you run. So, but once again, Max Kellerman, we already know with him, he's a super liberal Caucasian. He looks at the so-called black man as a machine, as somebody who's purely created for his entertainment. Allegedly, that's really all he's about.
Right? Even if you think some baseball player, a DH, isn't a great athlete, that's because by playing baseball, you can see that he's not a great athlete. You can't do that in golf. It only measures very specific athletic qualities.
You have people like Tiger Woods who have phenomenal golf swing speed, who had great, torque, phenomenal hand-eye coordination, great balance, great footwork, fast twitch muscle.
For example, hand-eye coordination, or maybe core torque, and then a certain amount of mental discipline. but it doesn't measure a host of other athletic attributes that we consider when we're talking great athletes. So like, I'll start there.
Okay.
Let alone the fact, like, Tiger's self-identification also, what does he call himself? Cablinasian or something, right? He refuses to be, it like brings to mind Jay-Z, the second song off 444, when he's talking about OJ. OJ says, I'm not black, I'm OJ.
Yeah, that was another way for Jay-Z, at the behest of his masters, to continue the constant assault on O.J. Simpson. That's all that really was about. And once again, that shows you the presumptuousness of the liberal Caucasian to think that they can comment on what so-called blacks choose to call themselves. But these will be the same people, the liberal Caucasian, who will tell you that if somebody wants to identify as bisexual or homosexual, that's their right. Well, by that same contention, if Tiger Woods chooses to identify as a quote-unquote Cablinasian, all these other racial terms are contrived anyway. They're all fictitious. Right? There's no such race as black. There's no such race as white. Your color is not a race. Color, period, is not race. So if Tiger Woods chooses to include the racial lineage of his mother and his father, or however many multiracial lineages he has, if he chooses to include that in what he calls himself, that's his business. That's his business. And to be quite honest with you, most so-called black people, as ignorant as most of them are in regards to their own history and racial lineage, they have no business criticizing anybody at all. All right. But that just shows you the nerve of Max Kellerman and Molly Karam with that derisive look on her face to mention Tiger Woods and the term that he chooses to call himself. That's his business. Is he a confused so-called black person? Absolutely he is. He's very confused about race, but that's not his fault, right? Or at least not all his fault, because he wasn't the one who decided to come from a multiracial background. He was not the one who was indoctrinated in the American school system that teaches you that color is race, right? Those are corporate terminologies, corporate designations. That's all they are. But to me, that's low-hanging fruit to say, well, Tiger Woods does not deserve to be on this list because he was multiracial and he decided that he was not going to call himself black. All right. Well, Muhammad Ali stated that he joined a group that stated that they were of the tribe of Shabazz. Does that mean that he should not be on the list because he came out and said, well, yeah, I'm black? I mean, what does that even mean? What does that mean? And by the way, Muhammad Ali's maternal grandfather was a so-called white man.
Okay, like race
well, he is Asian and black.
Sure. Race is certainly has a lot to do with, is a social construct largely.
Well, it's partially a social construct. It's mostly a corporate construct. It's for corporate designation. That's how they categorize you. You have to be categorized and counted so that the government has a better understanding of what they're going to do to you or do to administer to you. But we'll continue this on part 2.